Well, hello, and I'll say good day. I'm Michelle Whittingham, the Associate Vice Chancellor of Enrollment Management at the University of California, Santa Cruz. Welcome to our session titled Reimagining the University, the Student Experience Post-COVID-19. I know this is something that has been on everybody's mind, and we'll really look forward to a discussion with you to get some thoughts on the roles that we all had as we transitioned really quickly. We have a few questions, but most importantly, we want to make certain that you're engaging with us as the audience. And so if you have any technical issues, you can tell us about them. I'm not sure that I can help solve them, but you are welcome to tell us about them. Sandeep, our room host, will certainly help us out. But feel free to put any thoughts or observations into the chat option on the right-hand side of your screen or in the questions tab. So we'll be monitoring both of those. Again, I can't express how much I'm excited to engaging with you on this platform, although we would all much rather be in person. And for many of you, I know some of you may be brand new to IC3, but I became, I think, part of the official IC3 family back in 2017 when I attended my first conference in Delhi, and have been really involved since then in the IC3 Institute, as well as different sessions with one of my dear colleagues here today, Rajiv Kumar from Shiv Nadar University. What we want to do again is share some thoughts. So we'll have some questions as we do our introductions. And I think we only have a couple of questions before we hope to hear from you in terms of your thought on what the future student experience will be post-COVID. And so I'm going to have Rajiv, our first panelist, introduce himself, but I just want to, share with the audience my experience. And I was just telling Jody before this that Rajiv and I met, I think, back in 2018 when I was on your campus. And Rajiv came up to me and said, "Hey, Michelle, we have an agreement with your university." And so we have been having nonstop conversations. And now he's such a dear friend and colleague that I can almost ask your forgiveness, Rajiv, instead of permission when we put some session proposals forward. So I just really appreciate your friendship and collaboration.
Thank you,
So,
Michelle. Thank you so much.
yeah, so
You
how
know,
do you introduce yourself? Yeah.
I must appreciate the effort that Michelle has put in to get together this particular talk. And I must thank you once again for putting it all together. Thank you, Michelle. And let me say, you know, uh, good evening, because in India it is good evening right now, but good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all of you, to all the participants. I think it's a wonderful opportunity that IC3 has given to all of us to interact together. And let me start with a shloka. Uh, it goes like this: न चोर हार्यम न च राज हार्यम न भ्रातु भाज्यम न च भारकारी व्याय कृते वर्धत एव नित्यम विद्याधनम सर्व धनम प्रधाननम. Let me explain what does it mean, because it's a Sanskrit sloka, and then I'll introduce myself. It means that knowledge cannot be stolen by thieves, nor can it be taken away by kings. It cannot be divided among brothers. It is not difficult to carry. If spent, it always keeps growing. And my dear friends, the wealth of knowledge is the most superior wealth of all. And with this, let me say that I'm one of the wealthiest person in the world, because I'm a professor. And and I share knowledge with all my students, my colleagues, my dear friends. And so, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Rajiv Kumar Singh. I am a computer scientist, associate professor in the Department of Computer Science, as well as associate dean for the undergraduate studies. When this pandemic hit us, it was the responsibility of handling the COVID-19 response at our university was given to me. And of course there was a team behind me, but there was a large it was a very big responsibility which came on my shoulder. And I think with the help of students and faculty members and the resilient approach of our administration, I was actually able to do a very good job. And I must say that I never expected that the transition to the online landscape would be so smooth. And I think the fact that we are new, as Michelle, we were discussing that we are just 9 years old. The fact that we are new, we were already technology enabled in many respects. Our faculty base is relatively younger, and they come from few of the best universities of the globe. So basically they were sort of deeply embedded into technology, whether they belong to humanities or sciences or management or engineering. They all had the knack of technology. What we did was, we approached the whole thing uh, with a very flexible mindset, and with that flexibility, I think we were able to understand that we don't really understand the enemy that we have, but we understand ourselves, we understand our students, we understand our faculty. And I think that relationship is what we focused right from the beginning, and we made sure that our communication channels are open for all. So we were available 24 by 7 for our faculty, for our students, for our staff. And I think that was a big thing that we did. And we actually benefited. We not only survived but thrived. We succeeded. And I must congratulate all our faculty members and students that the agile response and the flexible mindset really gave us the advantage that 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 we are basically now seeing the fruits of.
That's really exciting. Congratulations, Rajiv. That's really impressive. And especially, I don't think I realized how much of that was kind of all you and coordinating with every area. Well, and Jody, I'm super excited for you to introduce yourself and share your role, because I got to see Jody firsthand at some of these different areas. And again, I think the theme for both areas is really accomplishing the impossible. And Jody, I know that you've written in some national articles, and I think you just recently went viral on Twitter. You were telling us this morning. And so I look forward to hearing from you, and I hope our guests do as well.
So yeah, good morning, everyone. It's really wonderful to be here, and thank you, Michelle, again for putting this together. So I am a literature professor, and 5 years ago was asked to found the campus teaching center. So I'm really in a faculty-facing role in my university, but of course the larger reach of everything we do is for the benefit of the students. I took on a full-time administrative position a couple of years ago to really think about the teaching and learning mission of a minority-serving research university in the U.S. So to really think about how do we boost the educational side of what's happening on the campus, and how do we improve equity on our campus while also allowing people to continue to be world-class researchers. So in a way, you could say one of the more bizarre upsides of COVID is that for many instructors, the research mission just stopped. They were not able to get to their labs. They were not able to get the research materials that they needed. And so really, we had everyone's kind of undivided attention to the educational mission. And people talk a lot about what the technological afterlife of the COVID experience is going to be. And I actually don't think that what happened during COVID has anything to do with the future of technology in higher education. This was as Rajiv said, this was a sort of agile hack. And if you were to go about making more educational technology, you wouldn't do it by putting an entire university online overnight. What I do think will really have changed is instructors seeking help in the design and delivery of their courses, and coming to experts in educational design and delivery to learn about what they can do. So I think people have become much more intentional, much more reflective. There's a lot more thinking about the student experience that's come about through COVID. And I think we're going to see the effects of those changes. I also found it astonishing how quickly my campus was able to make the move to online. And that's not only in the educational piece. I mean, I was blown away by Michelle's work. I was blown away by the work of the Global Engagement or International Education Office, how quickly those units were able to do what they needed to do to shift. And I think, if nothing else, the COVID experience will have put the lie to the idea that higher education is not nimble or agile or able to change when it needs to.
Yeah, no, Jody, I think that is really terrific. And I think you alluded to something that we're really interested in about the silver linings. And I'm not sure if everybody uses that terminology, that, what were some of the unexpected things that, may have ended up being really, really helpful as we've gone through this. And I didn't share a lot in the, introduction, my role. And so, Jody, I thank you, for sharing that, because we had the student experience, certainly in the classroom, certainly with research. And then you think of all of the administrative items, and we were really focusing on this new student cohort that, the continuing students were kind of working with their faculty and their advisors, but then thinking these poor new students that we had just recently admitted. I mean, we were just making those admission decisions. And again, one of our goals is that they make a really well-informed decision. So trying to provide, similar to this platform, we couldn't be there in person anymore. So how did we pivot? And so we were all working. And again, it was fascinating because it was this shared cohesive experience. And I think Jody and I have been on different discussions that I think higher ed did clearly demonstrate, and I'm sure, perhaps some of our colleagues, we hope to hear from the K-12 colleagues in terms of your experience of positioning. But when you have this sense of urgency and this exceptionally clear goal of what needs to happen, like all resources, like this was priority one, and everything else kind of came to a halt. And so, again, I think higher ed, as everybody could see in our session description, any president or chancellor that would have said, Rajiv, hey, or Jody, in a month, I need you to pivot, never mind a full year, you would be like, are you kidding me? And so it was really fascinating. But could each of you, and maybe start with you, Jody, as you continued, and then we'll go back to Rajiv, what was there like a particular silver lining or unexpected outcome specifically? And I think you alluded to some of those that you think will shape most impact where we're headed. And I think you mentioned a few of those, but was there one that you felt like, wow, this is really going to be a long-term impact on the student experience?
Yeah, there's so many, but I think, obviously from where I sit, it's really about instructor behavior. And so the fact that people are taking their teaching as an object of knowledge and practice and reflection, UC Santa Cruz is a research university that has always prided itself on having a really outstanding undergraduate teaching and learning environment. And we did have that. But we also hadn't really caught up to the explosion of work on evidence-based teaching practices in the last 20 years. So I think what the upside for us has been is that, we recently started to publish a monthly newsletter from our little teaching center because we didn't want to overwhelm people with email. And we're having 600 people open it in the first hour that it goes out at 5 o'clock in the afternoon on a Thursday once a month. 600 people open it in the first hour. I didn't even know 600 people read their email at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So the fact that many of them on the faculty are opening, and that's before it even goes to the graduate students the next day. So that's a really amazing indication for us. It's a hard number that we can look at, that about a third of the people teaching at any given moment are looking at that newsletter in the first hour after it's published. That means that people want help, they want resources, they want to know what new technological tools we're bringing on, but they also want to know how are we helping them thinking about these impossible tasks right now, about engaging students or helping students stay motivated. One of the things that breaks my heart during the COVID time is everywhere from the campus messaging to the national press talks about remote instruction as though that's what is making life difficult right now. The pandemic is making life difficult. If students are learning, it's not because of remote instruction, right? If they're not learning, it's because we're in a pandemic. And one of the dimensions of that is remote learning. But we can't really learn anything about whether or not remote learning is possible when people are under the kind of stress and, living situations and trauma and, emotional difficulties, financial difficulties, all of those factors are playing. And so I think, a big silver lining is to help instructors learn to seek resources, and a challenge is to separate the conversation around remote learning from the conversation around what happened during a pandemic. That's why we're so careful to call it remote learning and not online learning, right? This is not online learning. This is a hack that we're doing.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, and we might come back to that thought, the remote versus the online. Rajiv, what do you see as kind of that key? Like, wow, this is really going to forever influence the student experience in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yes, I agree that, past few months have been enormously challenging. But there are, I mean, quite a few silver lining, which I think got presented along the way that have to some extent boosted our confidence. I think what is important is to innovate and, be flexible, give tools and training to faculty to adapt, to customize lessons delivery plan, and that should be depending on the persona of the faculty, the students acceptance, and the subjects being taught, right? So, and the same tool, same technique may not work for a calculus course, and it may work for let's say, a history program, right? So I think that was the flexibility which we at SNU gave to our faculty members. We have a women vice chancellor who is very energetic. Okay, and our team of administration, whether it is pro chancellor or president, or you met Colonel Gopal, or our vice chancellor, dean of faculty, everyone basically understood that the faculty have actually started stepping up, and many of the students, in fact, they came up and said, "Can we help our faculty in moving to the technology in case they are facing difficulty?" So they came up to say, "We want to volunteer in case you want some help for the faculty." And I think what I, contrary to what many people said, the camaraderie between the faculty and the students that I saw was mind boggling. I mean, the social distancing, which has been the norm since last, many months, has also brought students and faculty together, because students have understood the importance of faculty, the importance of in-person classes, and the faculties have also understood what is important for a student, right? They have actually done a little bit more research now in understanding how can they actually make students learn. So in a way, something which they used to accept as given, now they've started challenging those norms. That is actually student learning, right? So some of these, and a third axis which came in the picture in this pandemic is the parents. And
Mm-hmm.
my feeling is, whether it is K-12 or university, the parents would also now be in access in the student learning, because they have now, I would say, they've really celebrated, the teachers, the acceptance of parents for the difficulties that teachers have. It's almost same thing that happened with health workers, right? The teachers actually went through the same stress and same difficulty, but they were able to adapt. And I think parent support, student support was instrumental. So I think, in my view, this is a big thing, and the triangle of parent, student, and teacher coming together will create a different kind of atmosphere going forward. I would also say that, what is that which students would take away
Mm-hmm.
in the next few years. So
Yeah,
I
that's
think
what I
one
really
thing,
understood. Yeah.
yeah. So I think one thing which is definitely certain is that the future of work was anyway changing, right? So it's not about it's pandemic or no pandemic. The future was going to be very uncertain, right? And that is because of the AI, machine learning, and anyway, I think there are a lot of things which are changing. History is full of such examples of how transformative changes have happened. Now, in the next few years, when the work spaces change, I think what is going to be important as a skill is, how do you manage self motivation? How do you manage work as well as family together? And I think these are some of the skills that we have all learned now by default. That how do you manage your family? How do you manage your work? How do you manage yourself in terms of motivating yourself? I think these are some of the new things which our students have learned, our faculties have learned, and the fact that they're now going to approach these problems with optimism, with resilience, with acuity. I think those are going to be key skills going forward in their adaptation to the future.
No, that's huge. No, that's really, really helpful. Jody, what do you see? And again, let's say we fast forward 5 years from now, and where are we? And again, I think one of the challenges is that people talk about when this pandemic ends, and are we going to go back to normal? And there's a lot of discussion. And before the session started, we talked about both ends of the spectrum. People that are like, man, let's fast forward this and let's be there, all right. While other people are kind of kicking and screaming, like, I don't know what this looks like. But there are a lot of positive things. And I think this shared experience is something that is really beautiful. And, the flexibility. Like, I think any individual to be successful, in the world has to be really flexible. What do you see maybe 5 years from now, and, what this student experience looks like? And I would say from, maybe the best practices, it's obviously going to vary greatly at different places, but maybe what would you like to see that student experience be 5 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, I think of a couple of things. Well, one is I do think that all education in higher ed, at least, will be more technologically enhanced than it was prior. I think, and campuses have invested in the tools, and instructors have worked harder than I can say to learn to use them. And we also we've brought students in to help as well. More as a kind of like, it's just difficult to manage teaching on a digital platform. I mean, students didn't know how to use Zoom any more than professors did at the beginning of this. So it's not as though they had technological advantage. So people tell me all the time, it was fine for the students to transition because they are, digital natives. And I'm like, they're not digital learning natives. They're digital entertainment natives. And that's actually a challenge. That is a challenge. That's not an advantage. It's a challenge because, we have to sort of turn these tools to different accounts. So I do think we're going to have much more technological enhancement of all dimensions of the learning experience. And I think that's probably a good thing, although we have to be very careful at a public university about what it means to be so closely enmeshed with the profit-driven ed tech folks who, may not always have student learning as their absolute highest priority. So that's one piece. And I think the other piece, which I've already alluded to is, I think that the changes that we're seeing in the approach to supporting student learning in the US scene were very slowly at a kind of glacial pace starting to transform educational practice on our campuses. I don't know how it is in other parts of the world, although I get asked to other parts of the world to talk about this stuff, so I'm not sure other places are that much farther ahead. But both a focus on educational equity and making sure that all of our students can succeed, and a focus on using the science of learning to impact higher education teaching in the way that has been the norm in K-12 for a long time. So the idea that college professors should have some training as educators in addition to some training as researchers. I believe that COVID moved us forward 20 years. Basically, in 3 days, we moved 20 years. The people in my lineup had been trying to push a Jeep across a sandy beach. And basically with COVID, somebody turned on the Jeep. That's what it feels like. Right?
That's
and so
awesome.
it took off, right? It didn't take off, at 90 miles an hour, but at least it started moving without our having to push it. And all of a sudden, those of us who work in instructional support or educational development or whatever you want to call it, all of a sudden we had everyone's undivided attention. Okay. Yep. The last thing, and I think Rajiv really put this beautifully, and I had not thought about it this way. In the ordinary course of a student's life on a residential campus in the US, their primary point of connection with the university is not their professors, right? They have all different kinds of other students and staff members that they're engaging with, and coaches, and all the other people that they're engaging with. And professors are pretty low on that list. That switched overnight with COVID, so that we are most students' primary point of connection to their life as university students. And I think that has led to a kind of almost like an intimacy that wasn't there before in both directions, where students have become much more reliant on their professors for everything from emotional support to technical support to learning support, right? And instructors have become, in a way, we've woken up to what the conditions are that our students actually live in and come from. And at a university like ours, it's often not the same backgrounds that our faculty came from. We have over a third of our students are first generation college students. We have faculty members who were first generation college students, but not an overwhelming number of us were. So I think that is another change, is that I don't know how to say it any better than we'll be paying more attention to each other than we were in the past.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, very good summary. Rajiv, 5 years from now, do you have a very similar, or is there anything you would add or take away from Jodi's?
Yeah, I think see, our response to this current situation, I think we were definitely successful. Educational institutions, whether it is K-12 or higher ed, everywhere, I think they made sure that not even a single day is lost. So that is something which we have succeeded. But I think there are a lot of challenges to overcome. Uh, it is a tectonic shift, no doubt. Societal expectations are going to change, and going forward, uh, particularly say in some places like India, for example, the gap between a privileged and a disadvantaged background people is huge, right? I think if you look at the current landscape of various states of India, my feeling is that providing digital equipment, IT infrastructure, laptop and mobile would now be the election manifesto of many of the political parties going forward, than roads and houses and all that, right? So it's a different thing which is going to happen, right? So I think there is a clear and the other thing which I see is there's a clear difference between university and training institutions, and SNU being a research university, we do share a lot of characteristics with UC Santa Cruz. We are a research university with a lot of focus on undergrad education. So I think the difference between research universities and the training institutions, that would be known to people now. you know uh, the universities which are focused on innovation, universities which are focused on research, and which are trying to give real education, they would not only survive, but they would actually succeed. However, those teaching shops which were distributing degrees will have to rethink and reorient, because you'll have high quality online degrees which might be available at a lower price point, and now there's an acceptance, right? So there's an acceptance from students, there's acceptance from parents. So I do see that going forward we might see a hybrid mode of teaching gaining traction and popularity. You see, there are certain things which machines can do beautifully, but there are certain things which humans are expert at, and machines would not be able to take that role. So what is important is, why not get the best of the two? I think going forward there'll be some acceptance of this kind of collaboration between man and machine. I do see that there will be a lot of collaboration between universities across the globe, because we have to move together. I think this is not something which I can solve myself or you can solve yourself. I think people have to come together. Uh, I call this as a beginner mindset. We need now a beginner mindset, because there is a great reset button which has been pressed, and so there are certain things in which we have advanced by 20 years, but there are certain things in which we are going back 20 years. For example, in terms of job, in terms of opportunities, in terms of earning capacity of the parents, so all that is also a question mark. And the digital divide which is going to increase. I think we need to approach this with love, with affection and compassion. Education is not just about information. If it is information, YouTube is good enough, right? It's all about relationship, right? And I think we need to invest in building that relationship, whether it is teachers, whether it is students, whether it is parents, and that is very, very important. And this transformation of understanding that what is the core of an educational institution, that I think would lead to a different, maybe acceptance of Gurukul system of education that we used to see in India earlier, where teachers used to be the guide by side rather than sage on the stage. So I do see, and it's already there. I know many of the people were not doing it. So as Jody said, we have moved 20 years ahead now in terms of acceptance of these role changes of faculty. And I think I do see some of these things happening uh, maybe slowly, maybe fast, depending on how fast we actually overcome this problem. But these things would happen now.
Absolutely. Well, I wanted
I
to
would
check
say
and
too that
definitely.
let me just say one thing about that, which is I think really important, and we don't talk about it enough, which is that we also have to retrain our students to be guided by someone on the side and to stop looking to the sage on the stage. Because one of the reasons that we are hearing that the students can't be, that they don't feel motivated, that they don't feel engaged, is that we've trained them to be very dependent on a certain way of relating as students. And by the time students get to higher education, I think we need to be guiding on the side, but I don't think I see nearly enough conversation about how do we prepare students. We actually have a workshop that we developed for our faculty that is how to help your students become outstanding remote learners. We didn't use the word outstanding. We used a word I won't say here, but how do you help your students become really great remote learners? Because they are looking to us for a completely different model of teaching. So we're in a bit of a tug of war right now, right? And that's something that I think we're going to need to think a lot about. How do we onboard students and teach them to learn in a way that we know actually will be learning that sticks? Because right now we have the teachers not teaching that way and the students not learning that way. And I think that's really a big challenge for us going forward. If I were on the student-facing side, I would be thinking about how to support students to become better learners in a way that we were not pre-COVID.
Yeah.
I completely agree with what Jody has said. And we did, Jody, we did some training for our faculty, but we also brought our students, online and said, okay, hey, you need to also understand and, understand how to learn in such situations, right? So, perfectly a valid point.
Well, and I love, Jody, one of the things you did with some of your messaging and tools was it's not just about keep teaching, it's about keep learning. And so really, pulling that out, which I think has been terrific. Well, I wanted to see, and Reshma, I know that you were out there. Reshma's from the Creative School down in Bangalore, and I don't know if we can get one of if you're able and willing, so again, I'm going to ask your forgiveness instead of permission. I mentioned to Rajiv, we're close enough now that I could do that. But Reshma, I know you are always terrific, and I would love to hear a little bit of the K-12 perspective, and I think you started alluding to that. So I don't know if we can get our IC3 room host to allow you to turn on your video and or your microphone, because this is the hard part. We love seeing the chats in there, but I'm like, I want to see Reshma. And so I'm hoping that even we can get at least a video on if we have an IC3 room host that could do that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Hi.
oh, you did do that yourself? Oh, awesome. You are it's so good to see you. I have to give her a hug first.
Virtual hugs. We do this. So in our classrooms in the K through 12, this is what we do. We put our hands on the side, and then I'd ask Rajiv to put his hand on his side to the left, and then we say, all right, we're saying hello. So because the kids love it, because they're really, as I was saying, and I was hearing Jody speak, they're really looking for just connection first. Because tools-wise, there's everything out there that they can learn online. And teachers are really having to run up and catch up on how to teach and hold their boat saying, yeah, I know what to teach, come to me. But kids are saying, I know what you're going to teach, don't worry, I'm going to turn my video off because you're not connecting with me anyway. So, so that's something that we are seeing a lot, that kids are only looking, frankly, as Jody so beautifully said, I think, digital entertainment natives and transferring them to digital learning natives. I think that's the key part. So we are trying to still hook the students a little bit through entertainment, I would say, in the way of connecting with them. But through that, after a couple of classes or through 3 classes, we do see them opening up and saying, we are really sincerely having a problem of motivation, or I know you've given us these assignments, but yeah, I'll get to them, but I'm not able to motivate myself the minute I turn off the chat. We have students doing something beautiful, especially our high school students. They are forming study groups in the nights of their own,
Okay.
over Zoom or over thing, and they're each working on their own assignments, but they're chatting a little bit here and there. It's like a study room that they're having online, and that's one way that they are coping with it. And then they take a small break for 15 minutes and they watch a little bit of anime together.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then come back and get back to work. But it's working that way. It's at least giving them motivation to work and deliver them their own understanding. Of course, reverse teaching is working for a lot of people. I'm sure I heard this from many of my fellow counselors and friends that
How do you
when we ask
define
them,
reverse teaching? Yeah, how do you define reverse teaching, Reshma?
basically asking them to come two ways. One, preview something, and then we just have a rich discussion. We'll leave the assignments for a later half of the time. Two, teach something more effectively yourselves, so that actually a teacher learns to learn through a student themselves. Like this morning, we had a literature student teach the English class comparative analysis by doing a comparison of Sylvia Plath and Ted Hughes' Wuthering Heights. And she taught it. And we didn't teach it. So we were students too for her. So, and through that, we just had a shared learning platform.
That's beautiful. Well, and again, I think the learning happens in so many different directions that maybe this model and this new experience will open that up, and even more so than it has already, that it's not always from just the faculty member. Now we tell students that, no different from even the staff perspective. I learned every year a lot from our students,
Right.
like faculty and staff.
Right. So thank you. Thank you for asking that question. Good
One
to
of
see
the
you.
things that came up, no, if you could stay, it might be between the three of you. And then again, if there's anybody else online, maybe you could raise your hand, because I know that I've already got the wording. I think we have about 6 minutes left. But yesterday at the presidential forum, one of the key themes that came up was, igniting that curiosity and thinking about how important that is. And I saw it almost as a definition. You ignite this curiosity. And I think, Reshma, we've talked about this before, allowing students to fail. Like that seems like it's really a scary thing to do. And then that equation is this plus this equals building the students' confidence.
Right.
And in this environment, this is for Rajiv, Jody, and Reshma, and then certainly anybody else that wants to add into the chat or raise your hand. How do we ignite that curiosity and even create opportunities for failure in this kind of new environment?
Okay, let me just add
one
one
of the
line here. Yeah. One of the things that we saw, and I agree with Reshma, in one of my class, in fact, I just added what I call as buddy system. So I paired them in groups, and I said, why don't you go ahead and discuss? And I gave them a project basically. So in the class where I used to take N term, I replaced that by a project. Okay, and a term paper basically, and they had to collaborate, work together, and send me when were they meeting, just the time, right? Just the time, that's all, that they're meeting from this time to this time, that's all, right? And and I really saw that at the end of it, the all I said is no plagiarism, because I'm going to check through a software.
Oh,
So if I find that, you'll get zero. So that was one condition. So I said, give it original thought, that's all, right? And read from anywhere, watch YouTube videos, do whatever, but what you write, it should be your own. And the outcome was phenomenal. I think if we trust our students, and trust becomes a very important factor. They will also start trusting you, right? So if you start with this assumption that students are going to be honest and keep using the right words, many times we don't get the right vocabulary to interact with students, right? That small sense that goes into the mind makes a lot of difference in the way they respond to your things. It worked, and I agree with Reshma that if you can bring together some of the students together, I think it's a wonderful thing. Jody, please go ahead.
Yeah, we have some challenges right around scale. We have classes with 500 and 600 students in them. And so it's difficult to do some of the things that we're talking about here, that especially that Reshma was talking about, although we've really tried to find some ways to do that. I think if I have one sort of disappointment or scroll way out, one of the things that I said at the beginning of the pandemic was we need to have a different curriculum during this pandemic. We know this will last, 12 to 15 months. Why don't we let students study plague literature or think about public health and because of our sort of policies around, course acceptance and proposal and all these things, we actually didn't change the curriculum at all. And I think that was a mistake because you spark people's curiosity by drawing their attention to things that are right in front of them and make them curious about those things. And that is something that I think in higher education, that's the agility that we need to think about much more, the content piece, rather than the practice piece, because we turned out to be quite nimble around practice and much less nimble around content or curriculum.
I think that is a beautiful point. Well, I'm looking at the time, and this is the hardest part of being a facilitator because I would just let it run over, and people who know me understand. But we did learn, Rajiv, that we can set up I think a group or a chat room or something later. So maybe sometime throughout the day today, I might go ahead and create. And I tested it last week, but I think the key is it won't show up unless we're in there. But we'll call it Reimagining the university, the student experience. And I might even call it, Reshma, the student experience post-COVID, so that it's even a little bit more inclusive, because I do love learning from both spectrums, and we're preparing students. This is one big continuum. And again, I don't think we'll ever go back to the way things were, nor do I think we should. And yet, God hope that we don't stick in this for any longer exactly as it is, but learning the best practices. And again, really thinking about those silver linings that we've had. And Jody, I cannot thank you enough. Your grace, your flexibility, and I don't know if everybody knows, Jody, you spend an enormous amount of time every year in India. And so I think similar, your heart and soul gets fueled by that and not being able to travel. So again, to know that our colleagues are a couple of button clicks away, and it may have been harder. So the silver lining is Jody's here with us today. It may not have worked if it was in person. And so it's been wonderful. And Rajiv, you've been phenomenal. And Reshma, I feel like you're a dear friend and colleague. And, we met at a session in 2017. And, Jody and others would love to visit the Creative School. And I will get there someday.
Please do. And love to be there. Yes, when you guys come in. Yeah.
And Arti and Shalini, thank you so much for engaging with us as well. And everybody who has taken the time to join us.